Okay, so once again, I would like to welcome you all very warmly to this final of the Vienna Freshers 2013. The motion that stands before this House reads: "This House supports that the U.S. This House supports the U.S. continuing its international surveillance practices on global political leaders." In opening government, we will be having RDUB with Novice and Emma. In opening opposition, we will have Warsaw B with Lukas and Bartosz. Closing government, we are having BBU A with Mihai and Anda. And lastly, closing opposition, Vienna economists with Hanna and Ingo. So once again, just as a reminder, this time we will be having 7 minutes speaking time, so you will hear a clap the first minute, and before the last minute, and after 7 minutes a double clap. Exactly, very well. And otherwise, yes, please use the microphones if you're asking POI so that everyone gets them. And yes, the only thing that remains to say is that I all wish you an enjoyable final debate and that we're all looking very forward to this and, of course, the social afterwards.
Good evening, everybody. I would like to welcome everybody in such great numbers to this final debate of this great competition. I would like to first, again, say the motion, so we exclude all the stupid little things that happen. This House supports the US continuing its international surveillance practice on global political leaders. So, firstly, to define a bit of things that we don't lose ourselves. Firstly, as surveillance of political leaders, we mean surveilling phone calls, emails, all kinds of communications, and actually having an idea what passes in communications between political leaders and in private lives of these political leaders, and what are they thinking about to say so, and what are they doing at the moment. I think it's rather obvious, but just to be clear. Also, on political leaders, we do mean all global political leaders, not just some of them, not just a part of the political leaders, but everybody. So we think that this motion is very important because with surveillance of these political leaders, we get the prevention of conflicts. We get the prevention of bigger conflicts that may occur because of the ideas that these political leaders get. So, to give a small example, if theoretical example, if US realizes that, I don't know, somebody in North Korea wants to do something that would cause some global or just regional problems or some kind of a war or some kind of an incident, they could prevent this if they know this is happening. But if they do not know and if they do not do this surveillance, they would not know. They could not stop something like that. So with this, we are getting prevention of bigger conflicts, of some bigger wars that could happen in the future. Yes, please.
Can you please tell us why would US want to stop the conflicts?
Thank you. The thing is that US is a big country, and US is a kind of political global leader, I'd say so. Not uniquely so, but it is. And it is not in an interest of such a big country to get in war with everybody. Because if you have multiple leaders in the world, which you have, there is not just one country that is monopolizing, but you have more countries that are big enough and present a threat, let's say so, politically and economically. It is not in the interest of these countries to get into war with each other. It is not in the interest to have a World War III. I think we can all agree on that. No, thank you. This would mean that we could reveal some tensions between countries before they escalate, and we could help prevent some kind of not to say wars, but some kind of conflict between countries before they escalate and before they become a big problem. We could prevent things like this before they actually happen on a big scale. Also, this would mean one big point, which I already kind of said with answering his point, but this would mean that US would actually track especially bigger leaders of bigger countries. And this would mean, no, thank you, and this would mean that we would not get a big global war, because we would not have misunderstandings. We would not have some tensions that would not be revealed, let's say so. And because of this, we would have more security for everybody, because we would not have make a less of an opportunity for some big war to escalate between the bigger countries, because US would know what is happening around them, and it would be easier to prevent things like that. Thank you. In this, we could also say that we do have such things as countries with radical political systems that could and do perform terroristic acts. And with this, having this system to actually have surveillance of these political leaders, we could actually get more security, not just on the global level, but for some country who actually is attacked by them, and we could prevent such a thing as a terroristic attack that is planned by the political elite of some country. Also, yes, please.
But who is surveilling the US? What might they be doing?
Well, that is a bit of a problem, but the thing is that, as I actually explained before, is that it is not in the interest of the US to have a big global war. It is not in anybody's interest, and US is not interested in having such a thing. So we think that it would be, no thank you, we think it would be much better to actually have some kind of a control system than non-controlling systems. I would like to also say that security is an important thing that we actually need to put before the private lives of these political leaders, and that we need to put before some private, let's say, right to privacy of politics of a country, because this means that we would get more security, and we would get more security on a global level, and we would get more security on a regional level. And because of this, we think that it is much better to have this surveillance system. We know it is not perfect, but it is better than nothing. It is better to have this surveillance system that helps us to have more security than to have nothing. This is simple as today, if you have cameras in a store, then it is less likely to have a robbery there than if you do not have cameras. It is the same principle. If you control, then this means that there is less opportunity for something bad to happen. And we think that security is important enough to sacrifice little things for. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am here to provide you with a rebuttal to what has been stated by the first proposition, and to present you why US shouldn't make this surveillance. First of all, I want to destroy what has been stated from the proposition side. First of all, they rely on a very naive assumption that good Uncle Sam will take care of everybody, that good Uncle Sam has some interest to take care of other countries, to take care of no conflicts there. It's not true at all. First of all, it is very naive to think, and even I, 16-year-old, and my friend, 17-year-old, wouldn't think that this would happen. Why? Because we have already a lot of examples. We have Gulf War, we have intervention in Iraq, we have intervention in Vietnam. These weren't interventions for freedom. These were interventions for money. These were interventions that US made to get money for their own people, to secure their own business. That's why they would use this information again to get money. So we know that it wouldn't be good for the great scale conflicts. Now we know that they wouldn't use it to prevent conflicts, but they would stimulate them to get goods from other countries. But in fact, what I and my friend will prove to you is that from the US side, it is also not good. Why? First of all, because there is no possibility of effective intervention, and second of all, there is no possibility of effective surveillance. So, talking about effective surveillance, first of all, a few months ago, there was something called a PRISM scandal. It was like this, that Edward Snowden got the data about PRISM, a system that somehow investigated what are these global leaders doing. And this is very similar to what the propositions want to propose us. First of all, this resulted in a lot of partners of US getting angry at them for spying at them. So no more friends of Uncle Sam. So they become weaker. Second of all, this resulted in higher intensity of controlling what US is actually doing. So if they couldn't control prison system to remain mysterious and unknown, how can they control any of these systems now when everybody is watching them? Because everybody knows that they had prison system, and that this story about good Uncle Sam is utterly wrong and naive. Yes, please, I want to welcome your question, first proposition.
Okay, thank you. Why do you think that it is bad if countries mutually control each other, and what do they do?
Thank you. Well, I don't think that mutually, because in your definition, Mr. Speaker, it was stated that this would be nearly all global political leaders. Do you think that all countries of the world spy on the US? Not really. Because there are no prison scandals in Poland or Austria. Yes. All right. So now we see that US won't be effective, and we see. So what are really the results of such pathetic attempt to somehow control your friends who somehow are with you? First of all, US wouldn't be able to use that info even if it would remain unknown, because it is no longer a unique superpower. It is no longer the division between the US, Western liberal democracies, and the communist countries. It was true 20 years ago, but not now. Now we have many superpowers. We have China, we have Russia, we have USA, and they are all in some sense stronger than US, because China has more stimulated economy, because China has more money to use for weapons, because China has now better army than US. So US wouldn't be able to somehow interfere and even stop these conflicts, even if they had this will, and they would not, even if they really would want to protect world's freedom and wouldn't gain anything from it. So US would only make a pathetic attempt that would somehow weaken their position and weaken what they can do. So now I want to tell you, why is this position so important? Ladies and gentlemen, what is your first connotation with the USA? Freedom, freedom. It was built on freedom. U.S. myth which started the U.S. is freedom, is freeing from this brutal English, is getting out on the global scale. And this is the only thing that remains. They are not an economic superpower. They are no longer a political superpower. The only thing that remains are values that they have. The only thing why Harley-Davidson is able to compete with Kawasaki is not price, it's not technical things that you can check. It is the myth of Harley-Davidson, that when you come on the Harley-Davidson and ride through the desert, you become a superhero you dreamed of. And what we do by this attempt is somehow saying, no, we don't really care about freedom. No, we don't really care. We want to... no, we don't really care about freedom of others. We want to control them at any cost. And this is totally destroying our position, which in fact we want to promote. And this is like the image that gives us profits, as it was seen from the first proposition, because they actually believe in this image. And why should we destroy it? They really believe that good Uncle Sam will protect global world peace when we will come and take the resources. That's how we, the US, work. That's how we do this. So we presented you two arguments that completely wiped out what can come from the proposition side. My friend will somehow deeper the analysis and prove to you that there are also other aspects of this situation that should be also considered. So. With all this said, I can clearly say that we can agree with this motion, and that the whole room shouldn't agree either. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's opening government is a great believers. We are great believers. We believe in the world peace, but we also believe that world peace can't be achieved on itself. We believe that there has to be there is naturally some sort of hierarchy, some sort of control, and some sort of surveillance that is necessary to achieve that peace and then to keep it going. So we believe that countries such as USA, who are such a big global superpower, are able to preserve and create that kind of peace and that kind of security, not only for their own country, but also for the countries around USA, for the region, and on a global level for the whole world. There are two areas of clash that we've heard so far, and there was one contradiction that we heard from the side opposition today. They said, firstly, they imposed a very important question: who will control the USA? And then they said that, so they made an assumption there is no one who can control the USA. But then they said that there are many superpowers in the world. There are many powers arising. And we believe, while it's important and while we would like to support the USA as such a global superpower who has the power of control and surveillance and prevention of global conflicts, while we're supporting the USA continuing its international surveillance practice, we also believe that there is nothing bad in other countries controlling the USA. And we believe that that kind of mutual control is the one that can preserve and create the world's peace. And that's what we believe in today. And also we hope that you will believe in that with us and try to achieve it with us. So, yes, before I go on, I'll take your point.
Can you somehow state why do you believe, or we just have to say, all right, you are convincing, we believe you?
Thank you. Well, you said it yourself. USA has a great, and not only USA but other countries, has a great military power, has a great economical power, is one of the G8 countries, so one of the greater powers in the world. And we believe that that kind of country, or those characteristics, are the ones which are needed to create this peace we are talking about. And then I would like to talk about, I would like to continue the line of thought from my previous speaker from the side government, how it's very important to this international surveillance practice, it's very important to find out about potential conflicts that could arise, about potential misunderstandings, and we believe in power of information as well. So we believe that if we have enough information, it is much easier to come to a mutual agreement between different countries, because misinformations and not having enough knowledge about what those countries are thinking of it can lead to fear, which can then possibly lead to a potential conflict or war. So we believe that power of information, which can be achieved by this international surveillance practice, is the one that can and will lead to more mutual understanding between global superpowers, and not only superpowers, but other minor countries, and will lead to world peace. We also believe that this kind of surveillance can prevent potential terroristic attacks or potential attacks with nuclear weapons and all other sorts of attacks that can arise in this modern society. I would like to make to move on to my substantial matter, which is safety versus right to privacy. And I would like to explain it on two levels. So we believe that on individual and country level. So we believe that safety, global safety, regional safety, local safety of every country and its citizens is more important than right to privacy of a certain politician, so on an international level, on an individual level, because those politicians, when they became politicians, were very aware of the fact that they are becoming popular and famous people and public figures, and by that they actually had to give up on their rights, certain rights of privacy. So we believe that safety is more important, and that safety of citizens and of people, of all of us, of all of you here, is more important and justifies the control and US interfering into the private conversations, private emails, private communication of political leaders. Yes, please.
What do you think would have happened to the safety of the US citizens if Iraq or Afghanistan had surveilled the US before the war?
Well,
If they had known that they were going to attack?
well, if who knew if
If Iraq, for example, had known...
What? Yeah, just finish up your sentence, please.
Okay, if Iraq had known and Afghanistan had known that the US were going to invade their
Thank
country,
you,
what
but-
would they have done with the US?
But they have done something. They made a terroristical attack, and then in response, the U.S. went to their country. So Afghanistan made. Well, no, thank you. Basically, what happened? Sorry, I'm running out of time, so I'll just try to wrap it up now. But basically, I was talking about safety versus right of privacy of a certain country, where I wanted to say, and to build up on what I said before, that safety of all the citizens and of regional level is more important than the privacy of a certain country that the US would be or is surveilling at the moment. Thirdly, we believe in a control system, and we believe if there is a control system, and if we are aware of that control system, that then we will try and act in a better way, and we will try to, for example, as my previous speaker said, if you're doing something bad, but you know that somebody is watching you, then you probably won't do it. I mean, if you were intending to do it. And in the same way, we believe that politicians who are well aware now that the USA is surveilling them this will prevent them from doing some bad things they were intending to do, such as stealing from the citizens or planning an international incident, etc. So as I said, we believe in world peace and we propose world peace by this motion. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, at first I would like to rebuttal and prove that the arguments of the propositions are wrong, and then I will move on to my arguments of the opposition. First of all, I would like to say that the control of US is preventing people from doing bad things to the US, not to other countries. It doesn't guarantee that US will help other countries in protecting them or anything like that. The second thing is, you said that the proposition said that US collects the information to prevent people from using it and doing something wrong, let's say like terrorists or dictators trying to attack other countries and so on. But what if the US uses the information with a bad purpose? What if the next president of the United States is an aggressive leader who wants to attack other countries and, let's say, conquer them? Is it still right? We don't agree. The next thing is that you said, the proposition said that the US will collect the data and will keep it and eventually use it against the terrorists. But the next thing is that, what if a terrorist got access to all the data collected? It is not guaranteed that US will protect it forever and that no one will try to get it or eventually get it. If a terrorist or a dictator, as I have mentioned before, got this data and wanted to use it, he would be able to start the Third World War or perform new terrorist attacks against free people, even of the United States. Okay, now I'd like to present some of our arguments. Yes, please.
But as you said, there are other superpowers in the world as well. So it's not like the US is the only superpower and will attack anyone else they want to. And it's in no one's interest, not even in the USA's, to start a third world war.
Well, no, we can't say that it's in no one's interest, because there might be a person that actually aims to start a new war. It doesn't necessarily have to be president of Russia, the first secretary of the Communist Party of China. It can be a leader of a small country that has some arms or, let's say, aims to build a new nuclear bomb. Starting with my arguments, US is no longer reliable because it doesn't fulfill its promises, which can further lead to losing of its allies, which would mean to the US that any further action, let's say trying to stop a dictator from attacking other countries, it wouldn't be that easy, because which ally would like to cooperate with a state that constantly spies on it? Yes.
So you're saying that if everybody is spying on everybody, France would not help USA to stop, I don't know, China from attacking Germany?
Well, I think that the point is that it's US spying on others, not everybody spying on each other or everybody. Therefore, I think it's an irrelevant question. The next thing is that if any further surveillance performed by the US is discovered, the United States of America will lose what's left from its respect, from its allies and trust. No one will ever cooperate with them, trade, because they performed something that no one really likes, despite the US maybe the US government. So that would mean, as I already said, that any actions, any trading would become much harder. Okay. The next thing is that I'd like to say that surveillance of private life of global leader is not really effective now. The spying on others will not be effective as everybody knows about it. So everybody is aware of the fact that the US are surveilling a mobile phone, an email address, and so on. And it's not the voters, the support of the US citizens, if they know that US is spying on global leaders, they might think that the privacy is no longer a privacy, and they might not accept it, which means that voters would decide in the democratic elections that we don't want this government, or just never support it. It will mean no support for the new US governments. Yes.
Sorry, but if you accept that every communication is somehow monitored, how would you communicate at all then?
We don't accept that it's monitored. We don't think that it should be performed, especially on global leaders. The last thing is that US is so powerful because it never really cared about world peace. It only cared about its own interest. I would just like to remind you that the US joined the Second World War after it was attacked by Japan, not after the events in Europe. That's the first thing. They also didn't participate in the war in Korea because it was a threat towards peace, but because they had an interest in that. And yeah, now I would like to conclude my speech and the speech of the opposition. We have mentioned that any further surveillance will not be effective, as everyone knows about it. Everyone is aware of the fact that US is spying on others. The US will not be capable of practicing other surveillance programs if one was already discovered. And US denies its own identity and values, the US government, despite the fact that they also will no longer be reliable for its allies. Thank you.
Okay, so Iraq, 10 years later, 500,000 victims. Why? Because the US didn't have any information. What information? The information that the Iraqis are not building any kind of chemical weapons. They were so paranoid about the idea that Iraqis might build chemical weapons and they intervene. Why? Because they didn't have any information that that thing is not happening. We think that by the US continuing its surveillance program, it will actually resolve this problem, will stop the US from intervening everywhere. Now, I'm going to talk in my extension about how the US is going to change their paradigm, how it is going to change the way they intervene in the world. They're going to change from the hardcore power that they are enforcing nowadays to a softcore power, to a power that is happening through diplomacy and to a power that is happening through prevention. But until then, let's talk about some points of rebuttal. First of all, why Uncle Sam is a good guy. Because we think that it is really easy for them to play the savior for everyone. We think that's their main attribute, the United States' main attribute. Why? Because they gain power, they gain legitimacy, they gain influence, and they gain economic advantages. That's why they want to play the savior. They want to play the savior for everyone in the world. That is why the Uncle Sam will do good things for all other countries. And furthermore, we think that somehow, we don't know really why, all of the countries and all of our enemies somehow, at the moment, they choose to attack the US. They choose to fight against the big guy from the bloc. We think that indeed every action that is happening right now somehow might lead to fighting against this guy that has the major problem, that has the major power in the world. So we think that it's helping their defense by this surveillance. Now, moving to the second point, the fact that terrorists might get data. Yes, we think that this is true, but this will happen both in the cases, will also happen in the cases where US is no longer surveillancing whatsoever the terrorists are doing. We think that the terrorists will continue to do that, and leaders that are not from countries that come from Western liberal democracy will continue to do that. So the info and the data only gets to the bad guys, only gets to the bad side. We think this is extremely detrimental. Third point of rebuttal. The fact that we might lose friends. Well, we're saying, ladies and gentlemen, that sometimes our friends become our enemies, and this is the major thing that history learned. We can learn from history. We see that a lot of countries in Europe actually changed their sides in the both of the world wars. We think that you cannot trust a country because the country might always shift and turn their guns against you. We think that this is legitimate for US to surveillance even Germany, even France, even England, all the world. Now, the fourth point, the point of the idea that somehow they will, leaders of the political scene will encrypt their messages and they will hide their information. First of all, we think that they still have to communicate, right? They still have to communicate with one another. They still have to meet and communicate and all these things. They still have to send emails, to talk to the phone, and so on and so forth. We think that this cannot happen without these means of communication. And second of all, if they have the technology to encrypt whatever message, whatever emails, so on, we think that the United States has the technology to break those encryption. It has the technology to further pursue what they want, and it has the ability to know everything that is happening in the world, no matter how much you protect your own information. Now, let's move to what really matters in this debate, and that is our extension. Oh, thank you, sir. The point where the US is kind of shifting their paradigm, is shifting the idea that they want a hardcore intervention in all of these countries. We think that the big kid from the block still wants to protect everyone, but he doesn't want to fight anymore against anyone. He doesn't want to intervene from the military perspective. So 2 points at this, our extension that is called the soft power. First of all, the US doesn't want to intervene anymore from the military perspective. It doesn't want to put boots on the ground or whatever. Second of all, we think that they still want to intervene in other ways, and we're going to show you how. So why doesn't the US, right, the big kid from the block, they don't want to control the world as they controlled it before? Because we have to agree that someone needs to control everyone. Someone needs to control North Korea, someone needs to control China, Iran, Iraq, and all these countries. Someone has to do this duty. We think that they have assumed this duty. So why the United States, for example, is not intervening in Syria right now? Why is not helping all of these people that are in need? Well, 3 major issues. First of all, we think that it is damaging for their image to put boots on the ground and kill civilians and kill people. They don't want to do that. Second of all, because it costs a lot. They spend a lot on their defense. They spend a lot on wars, on military, and so on and so forth. And third of all, because the population is against this kind of intervention. Why? Because the population is not really against the idea that the United States should do something to help. As if it's on the idea and the rhetoric, it's about the fact that they are not helping the United States citizens in the first place. We think that the United States is able to do these 2 things by changing to soft power, right? By changing to diplomacy. By seeing what happens in the moment when they have the information, they can prevent everything that's happening in the neighborhood, everything that's happening all over the world. They have the ability through diplomacy and for other kind of attacks that I will develop further on. So why the United States has this duty and wants to have this duty further on to protect everyone in the world. So we have 4 major points in this argument. First of all, the point of influence, right? Everybody knows that they are the most powerful, they gain influence, they gain legitimacy. Second of all, because they have some sort of a history background where they always intervene to fight for the goods. It's their duty. Third of all, we think that they are the big kid from the block, right? And it has that develops some sort of responsibility to protect everyone. Fourth of all, because we're talking about defense, we're talking about how everybody ends up attacking the US in one way or another because they are the most powerful. And in order to gain influence, in order to become the most powerful country in the world, you have to attack the US, you have to take them down. So this is the four reasons why the US still wants to protect the world. The US still wants to protect themselves. So how are they going to do it? Well, I think that they are going to do it through soft power. And this soft power is only able to happen if what happens, So what they're gonna do? They're gonna do it because they have the information. They're gonna use diplomacy, right? They're gonna use threatening. They're gonna use cyber attacks. They're gonna kill the scientists that have built the nuclear facilities in Iran, that this is the example per se of what happened. So we think that in the end, the United States still wants to protect us, but they don't want to put more boots on the ground. And because they don't want to put more boots on the ground, we think that somebody should take care of the whole world, and the United States can only do this by having the information, by having the pre-information about and knowing what's going to happen.
Just one moment to get us sorted. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, speakers, I will start today's extension speech to outline what I'm going to say. I will bring up that argument and elaborate further on it that we heard about, that the US is actually harming its status by pursuing with this policy, and the other argument that they in no way have the authority to take out this right. But first, let me bring some points of rebuttal. We have just heard from my previous speaker that the US is developing as a soft power these days. Do you buy that? I don't yet, until I'm proving differently over a course of a couple of years, because he said that the US is actually the one being attacked right now. Is it? Because the last couple of wars that I know about, the US actually started, and they're still in these countries, to add the least. So the US becoming a soft power, I would like to see that, of course, but I'm not holding my breath, let's say that. He said that the US is able to measure all these things and surveil, so we should, God bless, thank them. But just because they have these means, does that mean that they're in authority to use them? North Korea has nukes. I would dare you to have them use them. Good. Second point. The point that allies might become enemies in the future. We have very publicly seen in the media that especially European world leaders have become subject of this invasion of privacy. And I would like to see the EU try to start a war with the US, because we don't have the troops for that, to be honest, and we don't have the funding for that, and it's not in our interest to have the US as our enemies, mostly because they have so much information. I will take them later. Now let me come to my points of extension to the granted good speaks of our colleagues in the opposition. First, the issue of authority. We have heard that the US is somehow a superpower, that they come and missionate us. They have helped us in the past, of course, but as we heard, that was a different system. It was communist societies versus Western societies. I just saw you Marshall Plan and these things. But today, the political parquet looks a little bit different. The US has in no way the authority to take out the right to surveil other nations. There is, in fact, however, a good other organization that would have that right and would be helpful if they use that, because I don't want to negate that some of your points are valid. Of course, security is more important in many cases, as the past has proven, but this is not the right mean. The US is not the right facilitator of this security. In fact, the United Nations is. The United Nations is an organization that is independent, that is representative of our global politics, and it's well suited and also well equipped in terms of finance, in terms of the legal groundworks to conduct this sort of regulation. Just one moment. And there's also such thing as an international court who would serve as an extension to the United Nations in that regard. So let's leave it up to the ones that are actually formally allowed to do this. I will take your case.
Okay, thank you. So, do you think that it is relevant if we have either all the countries in the world surveilling each other or just UN? Because if UN is the
I
only
get it.
one...
Wait, what? How efficient is that? If every country is just surveilling everyone, so everyone has terabytes of data that they cannot handle anyways. We have already proven, or you have already proven, that it's hard to operationalize it. It's hard to kind of draw any implications from that, from the data you have found, because you don't have the authority. And the UN could do that cumulatively, and they would also have the actual power to act on what they find and to use that information positively and productively, and not in a potentially economic abusive way. Moving on, I would like to give you a little bit more, present a deeper case on what our pre-speakers have already introduced, namely why this is actually really harming the US as one of our global superpowers. The US, if any one of you has been there lately, are awfully scared of the Chinese these days, legitimately. And this, however, this behavior is actually them cannibalizing one of their last opportunities to stand up to the Chinese. They're cannibalizing their own superpower that they once used to be so proud of. Why? Because they're undermining the trust that they have gained over the last decades. So that is rather undiplomatic, to say the least. The international political environment is a walk on a tightrope, to say the least. And the US depend on other parties and other countries to make their case. And if they enact a breach of trust, how would they ever get them on their side anymore? For example, there are many examples of where the US could not have acted as the superpower they claim to be if they hadn't had their allies. Iraq war, France and Germany as allies, to just state the least. So the Chinese are catching up, and by ruining these alliances, they're actually leaving all that competitive advantage over to the Chinese and are cannibalizing their own superpower. And in the end, I would like to briefly summarize what I have now presented you with. I have rebutted some of the cases and have shown that the US is by far not innocent, and even further, not in the least, has the authority to act on what they have here. Of course, great knowledge base and stuff, but they cannot use it. And secondly, I have provided you with a suitable solution for this case and have introduced a party that is formally equipped to actually take over this matter for the best of all of us. Because as we all agree, and I'm glad that we do, the international security is what is most important in the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Hannah. And now I'd like to call upon Anna to sum up this slide in this position.
So the main problem with the government's team today was they talk about interventions of the United States being because of the personal interests of the United States and not for helping the other countries, which is rather vague from our perspective, because they never told us what the interests are and why is it so bad. What was the harm because of intervening from the interests when solving an international crisis? Because the only examples that they actually offered, we saw how they were caused because of misinformation, and if the interventions have failed, it's because the United States didn't have access to the information they needed in order to make a successful intervention. Now, second of all, they are talking about how the United States is no more the superpower it used to be, and that we have other superpowers that should control the world, or as far as I get the information from their side. They're talking about China. We ask you here, when did China actually intervene to solve an international crisis? We saw how the United States is the only power that has the interest to actually intervene, is the only power that has actually been active on international level. So we need to keep this in order to solve the crisis, but I'm going to talk about this more in our extension. Their third point was that someone needs to control the United States too, because it's not fair if only the United States has access to secret data. First of all, we are saying that yes, the other countries still can control the USA, still can spy on them too, so it shouldn't be only the United States that has access. But second of all, even if they shouldn't, we see that we need someone to control the other countries more. We need a hierarchy. We need someone to have access to everything, because if not, then how are we actually going to prevent the conflicts happening? Who is going to intervene when we actually have a situation where their needs, what needs intervention? Their fourth point was that if other countries get information with spy on them too, or if terrorists, as we told you, they can do it now. And second of all, then they should better be prepared. Now, moving on to the extensions, we see that the second opposition argumented how it is not legitimate to do so according to international laws, and it is not okay for a country to have access to secret data just because there are some international laws and some ethical issues involved. What we are talking about here is the fact that laws are actually enacted to protect the citizens. If these laws were implemented because we need control and we need some harmony in the world, we need these conflicts to be prevented, we need someone to protect the citizens. So even if we should be to talk about ethical issues here, we see that safety is even more important, and we should not care about it. Second of all, they talked about destroying the trust, given us the example of China. Actually, we see that there's no trust between China and the US right now. There's kind of a cold war between the two, like it is between the US and Russia. So we see that this trust that they are talking about, it's not actually a fact right now in the status quo, so we would not have a disadvantage on this side. Now, moving on to our extension, which was the soft power, and why the United States is changing strategies right now, because it realized that interventionism actually doesn't advantage the state, and why we need this soft power to still go on, and why having access to data is actually going to move towards soft power. The only argument here was that they're not buying it. That was the only sentence actually stated on our extension. Now, we see that because of the fact that right now we have misinformation, and because of the fact that the United States right now fears the other states that they will actually do something, that they will actually threaten, they become hostile. Because of this hostility between states, because we have no information, then there arise more conflicts, and that is why because misinformation, we actually have not much of a safe world. But if we actually give them access to information, give them the information, we will move to diplomacy, because we will actually have
have the option of cooperation with the other states. We will actually have the option to know what they are thinking and what is going to do to be their next action. So that is why we need this in order to move to soft power, because every action of the United States will actually move towards cooperation and trying to move on to diplomacy in order to solve their problems, and will not just intervene just because they think that someone in the Middle East might threaten them in the future. Now, why is the United States sick of interventionism, and why is it going to actually move towards this soft power? First of all, we have the examples. We see how the United States is actually retiring troops from Afghanistan because they realized it's not okay to keep them in there. We see that in Libya, when it was the case of an intervention, the United States first of all said they do not want to intervene. They do not want to intervene there. They do not want to intervene there because it is not okay. And we see how they are moving towards a policy of no interventionism. We see how in Syria they are not intervening right now when the other people think they might do. So we have the examples to show how the United States does not want to do that anymore, and even if it would be for its own interests. We see how, because of the fact that their resources and the costs of interventionism is actually disadvantaging them, they are realizing it is not good anymore. We see because of the pressure coming from the population, which is sick of interventionism also, then they are going to move to the soft power. So given the fact that we showed you how the United States is still the single superpower that needs to have control, because it is the only one that actually gives an interest to solve crises, and we need one of these. So this is our obsession today that was never rebutted. We see how, because of the fact that we need this superpower, that the United States is the single power that actually will do something, and that we need defense and security, and because of the fact that the interventionism era is over and soft power is going to be more and more advantages for the people, for the state, and does not bring all the disadvantages the government team proposed. That is why we should actually propose the motion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished jury. In my opinion, the main point of the whole debate was whether the US alone is capable of keeping world peace by surveilling everyone else. And I would argue it is not. Before starting with rebuttal, I will just tell you what I'm going to talk about afterwards by indicating that our points, the points of the opposition, were actually more convincing and would really provide the world with peace and with trust. Now I'm going to sum up on an international level, talking about trust, whether the US is really still the last superpower, and then on a national level, on these severe violations by the US spy programs. Now let me start with rebuttal. Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq. Since 1945, these are 4 major wars by the US. Now, opening government tells us they're a firm believer in world peace. Good luck. Closing government tells us the US is a soft power. Really? Afghanistan and Iraq? 2 wars still going on? Soft power, that is it, yeah. Now, we hear from basically both government sides that, especially opening government, that the US that the US wants to support the interests of the whole world, the interests of others. Well, I would argue the US really supports its own interests, really supports its economic interests, its political interests, its power interests. The intervention in Iraq, as we all know, wasn't because of weapons of mass destruction that never existed. It was because of oil, it was because of economy, of power, of influence. Thank you. Okay.
let me go on. We hear from especially opening government that others are surveilling as well. Well, that might be, there is no proof. And if they did, apparently the US were silly enough to get caught. So they have to deal with the problems now. And you couldn't offer us a proof that others are indeed surveilling the US. Might be, we don't know. Now, a new world war, another big argument offered us by government, started by North Korea. I agree that North Korea is a severe problem to world security, but I really rather doubt that North Korea would indeed be able to start a new world war. And by the way, the US isn't only surveillancing their potential enemies or maybe real enemies, they're surveilling Germany, France, they're surveilling their allies. Do you think that Germany or France would start a world war against the US today? I really, really doubt it. Now, moving on to the issue of terrorism. First of all, usually, in most cases, terrorism isn't financed by states. That's not a state activity. There might be states that have some kind of sympathy with some terrorists. Indeed, it appears that Afghanistan might have provided shelter to Osama bin Laden, but still, it is terrorist organizations that are non-governmental in a way that commit real terrorist attacks, not states. So attacking states will rather do one thing. It will heat up the whole situation. It will make the population of these states, where maybe there already are sympathies with the terrorists, actually increase their sympathies with these organizations and with these people. So in our opinion, this case doesn't stand. Now let me continue with telling you why we argue that our points are actually more convincing. Starting on an international level, we heard the US is the only remaining superpower in the world. Well, maybe the US is really the strongest superpower in the world. I would argue that China is pretty much upcoming as a new superpower. I would say that Russia isn't completely out of the game. So the US relies on their allies. If they want to stay the #1 superpower, they have to have their allies. Now, if you're surveilling your allies, that's actually a rather fraudulent practice. That inhibits trust. It stops the trust of your allies. It splits, It splits your agreements with your partners. And indeed, therefore, it not only eliminates or tends to eliminate the US as the last remaining superpower, it also helps their potential or real enemies, because now the Western, if you like, bloc in the world is split up. We don't agree anymore. We have, if you like, internal problems. So the last superpower may be, but only together with their allies. Now, moving on to a national level. Go ahead.
Would you just explain to me, if UN is also an organization between which there are countries with economical interest, how is then so much better that UN controls everything and not everybody else is controlling each other?
First of all, I think everyone else controlling each other is just ridiculous. Secondly, the UN is the international organization where we can debate things, where we can decide things. We have a Security Council that can take actions that is responsible for potential violators to world peace. Now, on a national level, I would say that we had, by surveillancing international leaders in their own states, a severe violation of national laws in these states. Now, of course, there is a principle in public international law that one state cannot rule about another in its own court. But again, there is where the UN comes in. If you violate basic principles by surveilling other leaders, allied leaders, indeed, that is an issue for the UN to debate, to decide. and for international courts as well. So, summing up, I think the government couldn't really indicate that their case stands. They couldn't say that the US really is in soft power, and they couldn't say that world peace would remain safe in the hands of the US. I continue to say Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq. Thank you.